Welcome back. Well, here's a live look at the White House where speculation is starting to swirl whether former President Donald Trump will he run again in 2024. Trump remains the dominant force within the Republican Party, but his grip is slowly starting to slip, with some questioning if his endorsement even matters at this point. But it's still possible the run for president could be a packed field for Republicans, especially if going up against Donald Trump. Joining us now is NewsNation political editor Chris Stirewalt. And questions for you, Chris. Will Biden run again in 2024? There's a lot of speculation. He's not fit enough. He's too old. He fell over on a bike. What do we think?
I mean, I would definitely fall over on a bike if I tried to do that. So I'm not going. I won't judge anybody harshly for tipping over. But yeah, Joe Biden is already kind of a lame duck because he's not a credible threat for a second term. At this point in a president's first term, what you are looking for is them consolidating power behind themselves in the party, bringing the party to a point of unity where they're ready to back them up going into the next stage of the fight. Because we all know as soon as the midterms are over, as soon as we get to one day after Election Day this year, the 2024 cycle really gets started. Biden's none of those things. He's kind of a lame duck because people in his party openly question not only whether he will run again, but whether he can, and by the way, if you're a president with an approval rating in the 30s and the economy's in tough shape, there'd be a lot of Democrats who would hope he would step aside.
Well, he still has more time left, so let's see what happens. But will Democrats primary Biden? If not, who will they try to get in that spot?
Well, there's another scenario, of course, that says Biden steps aside. Now, he has a problem because his vice president, who would be the natural heir apparent, has a lot of political liabilities of her own. Kamala Harris, not well liked and not particularly good at running for office. So there's a real vacuum in the Democratic Party once you get beyond Biden, right? There isn't an obvious other person. People have even asked Hillary Clinton, for goodness sakes, whether she might run again. She says no, but there isn't an obvious group of people that you'd say, yes, this person could unite the Democratic Party. Do I expect that if Biden runs, he'll be challenged? Yes, certainly. I would imagine that Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, one of those folks on the progressive side of the party, would challenge Biden. And of course, that could weaken him going into the general election further.
Okay, let's move to Republicans. Who is the GOP frontrunner?
Well, you have to say it's Donald Trump. If all he had was what he went into 2016 with, which was about a third of the party really fiercely loyal to him and sort of in his thrall, if he's got that, the Republican field is going to be very crowded. You can bet on it. And as Trump goes forward, if he has a fervent group of supporters, that's probably enough for him to be considered the frontrunner. Certainly, there's nobody more likely than Donald Trump today to become the Republican nominee. But people like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, people like former Vice President Mike Pence, have a credible claim that they can make, that they can deliver better results than Trump and do so without all the baggage from his sort of self-coup, the January 6th debacle and all of that they can sort of turn the page for Republicans.
Well, there's been a lot of kind of words looming around DeSantis and him getting a lot of money. Do you think that he could make a win over Trump?
Well, certainly DeSantis's pitch would be, I'm from a big state with a lot of electoral votes. I am a popular governor in that state, and I am beloved by culture warrior Republicans who love his stance on hot button issues that have to do with, transgender issues and other stuff, that he is the guy that the sort of the Republican culture war nationalist right would really rally behind. But there will be others, too. It won't just be DeSantis who gets to do that. What happens to Ted Cruz? Where's he going to go? Is Rick Scott, his fellow Floridian, the senator from that state, is he going to run? So this will get very crowded and very sticky very quickly. DeSantis and Trump have a big advantage. They're out front and they're early, but that also makes them targets. Trump, when he won in 2016, was a surprise entrant, was a dark horse, and then surged to win. That's a better position to be in than a fixed target, which is, I think, where Trump and DeSantis both are.
Okay, quick answer. Do you think Pence will run?
I do, and I think he'll have a good shot.
All right, Chris Stirewalt, thank you so much for your time. Next,
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.